to the boardroom. This is the business of esports. As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner, YouGov, offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports weekly news show / post podcast live stream. I am Paul, the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Barada, Jeff the Juice Cohen, Lindsay the Boss Poss. For those of you who are new here, welcome. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, and we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. But best of all, we get to do it live with you guys. We get to participate. You get to ask us questions, get in our faces, challenge us. We encourage you to do so. We know so many of you lurk, but we welcome you to participate. It's okay to lurk too, but we welcome you to participate. It's a safe space. We love doing this every single week with you guys. Lindsay, how you doing this week?
Been a good week. It's been so busy, but a lot of fun. Just like recovering from being sick once again. But you know how it goes.
COVID this time. I'm about to be a little offended, guys. Owen says it's juice time, lads. And there's the honorable judge, the boss herself, and all in caps, by the way, and Paul, all in small letters. What's going on?
I have a new favorite listener.
It's like juice, judge, boss, Paul. Like, what's going on? Why no enthusiasm about the prophet here?
Prophet's old news, man. You know, like you gotta freshen up the act.
Chris says today's secret word is overvalued. Chris, we've missed you. And the Activision Blizzard conversation was last week, if that's what you're referring to. You missed it by a week, my friend. And Owen says, I'm just joking around. We love you, Paul. Thank you, Owen. I appreciate it. I was just teasing anyways. Jimmy, Jeff, how you guys doing this week?
I'm doing good. I made this joke on the Meta Business podcast, but it's not out yet, so I'll make it again. I'm disappointed that we have not had the largest gaming transaction or the largest transaction in gaming history yet this week. You know, it seemed like every week we were getting one, and we haven't gotten one yet this week. So there's still
slow week
in gaming. I mean, we only got a $1.5 billion esports deal, but no $100 billion deal. So back to sleep.
Yeah, Chris, we're definitely going to talk about the FACEIT ESL deal. But in comparison to last week, like $1.5 billion does seem kind of small potatoes, right? Like this is just your everyday deal. This is nothing monumental. By the way, I just want to, before we get into it, because we have a bunch of stuff to talk about, I want to tease the podcast that you guys can expect this week, Business of Esports podcast that you can expect this week with none other than Bruce Stein. Bruce has like, I don't even know, Jimmy. I'm probably not exaggerating, but is a legend in the world of anything fun. I mean, the man was president and COO of Mattel. He was CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment America. He was president of Kenner Products, like they did all the Star Wars toys. And then he was the co-founder and CEO of Axiomatic Gaming. So they were the investors in Team Liquid. They're investors in Epic, Niantic, like you name it. The man is truly a legend. And it was such a fun episode. Like I really, it's one of those rare episodes where I spent like an hour just learning myself. So I really think you guys are going to enjoy that episode. He just has so much knowledge and experience and insight, and really, really great episode. Owen says, Paul, you genuinely look tanner each week. Can you pass some to the rest of us? Owen, I'm not getting tanner. The other three here are just getting more pale. I just
hey, why do we have to be the problem?
And Jeff's really tan. It's just relative to his black cap. He looks more pale. That's all. Neil says spoke to Bruce last week. He gets it at the highest level. Neil, I agree. The man is really brilliant, and I'm curious what you think about the episode when it comes out this week. Would love to get your feedback on it, but he was just incredibly interesting and incredibly insightful. So stay tuned for that. I want to start today, guys, on a little bit of a follow-up from last week. You know, we spent an hour of the weekly news show last week talking about the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition. Obviously, we dissected it from a million angles. And this week, this is partly a joke, but I think it's a really interesting sort of thing to tie this to from the last week conversation. And this was a headline that was from MSN or / they're pulling it from .esports, I think. And the headline here is Blizzard is working on a new survival game. And so I had teased, I had been teasing Activision Blizzard and joking on the podcast that, they haven't made a new game really in the last, 5 years at least, probably more like 10. And, whenever Overwatch came out, so 6 years ago, whatever it is. And now the acquisition happens and immediately we get news of a new game. So I'm curious what you guys think here. Is this, Phil Spencer putting his foot down and like, we got new games already, Blizzard's reinvented, new company, off to the races? Or is this just coincidence and timing? I'm curious where you guys are at on this and what you read from this, because it is an interesting announcement a week after the acquisition was announced. Jeff, start with you. You were smirking here. I know you have thoughts.
Oh, I was smirking because, obviously you're making a joke question, but I would like to think that it was Phil Spencer marched in and said, I don't even own you yet legally, but go make a new game.
Go make a game.
In 4 days, the Blizzard team said, oh my God, we've actually been waiting this whole time. Like we got something pretty cool we could show you. And he said, yes, go announce that. So maybe that's what happened, but probably not. It is interesting though, because this would have been big. We would have been talking about this anyway. In a different context, this, if the Microsoft acquisition never happened, we would still be talking about this. And I think it would be fairly big news, way bigger than it is now, because I think as Activision Blizzard is sort of subsumed into this behemoth that is Microsoft, any one title just doesn't become as important anymore. But if we take away that acquisition, like this would have been very big news that Blizzard is making a new title, and it seems to be getting pretty interesting like feedback. I know Jason Schreier said that even the people he talks to at Blizzard that are super negative and kind of like very dour about the whole situation have had really positive things to say about this game and the team that's building it. So, I mean, good for Blizzard. I think that, hopefully people stick around and actually see this to the finish line. Lindsay made a funny joke. I forget if it was in our Discord, which you should all join, or on Twitter, which you should go follow me at JeffCohen23. Little plug. Where she said,
"Joke."
The juice. I'm gonna take a week off. Let Juice run the show. I mean, come on. This is professional. This is professional at this point.
So what Lindsay said was, I think she said, when does this game come out? 2030, 2040, or 2050? And I thought that was funny because it probably will be something like 2030. But yeah, those are my takes.
So let me just ask a more specific question. By the way, everyone should go join our Discord. I put it in as many chats as we can. You may be watching or listening from a platform that I can't actually send messages to, but if you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitch, if you're on YouTube, you'll see it. It's discord.gg/metatv. It's super easy to remember and super easy to join. And we're there all the time, the four of us. So please come join us and discuss all of these things. But let me ask a more specific question, which is, can we talk about the business decisions that they made here, specifically survival game, specifically PC and console, right? So no mention of mobile, and specifically new universe, like new IP. So not set in the Warcraft universe or StarCraft universe or any other Blizzard or not Overwatch universe, set in none of the existing universes. So survival game, new IP, and console and PC. What do you guys read into that? And do you have thoughts on those three key sort of business decisions here with this new game? Jimmy?
Yeah, it just sounds like the shackles have been lifted, released, the creativity is flowing. There's more to come. It's nothing but clear skies ahead. We're all excited whenever Activision Blizzard makes an announcement, just because the IP and I think what that company's been able to accomplish has been so great. This is just like the best of everything because it's new IP in particular, right? Because that's usually been the criticisms, like, okay, I don't want to play Diablo 4. Like, give me something that doesn't, give me something that's, I mean, at least me, I was never.
And there's a lot of people who want to play Diablo 4. Right?
I'm gonna make a bunch of enemies. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of Diablo. I'm gonna make a bunch of enemies. But still, you know what I mean? Like, it just, okay, what's the sequel? What's the re-release? What's the, that became the question for a while.
We could argue that these are risky choices, though, right? Like,
yeah,
I could make the argument that a mobile game in an existing universe, in a genre that is, more mainstream, would have been a way safer bet to come out of the gate swinging with, right? Like this feels quite like a risky choice, and I don't know how much of this you ascribe to Microsoft. Maybe zero, right? Maybe Jeff's right, and they've had no impact yet. I would love to believe it was Phil Spencer who walked in day one and is like, okay, guys, we're making a game. What is it going to be, right?
Well, I think most likely, they have a backlog of content and ideas that they were just waiting to green light that for whatever reason wasn't getting pushed through, right? I agree with you. The other route is a lot safer, and I don't want to tease too much from the episode today with Bruce. He had such admiration for younger companies that took bigger swings because they were able to do that, right? That was the balance. When you get too large, is that you have that set identity, and when you're young, you can follow the popular culture shifts and trends and create them. So I think more likely this was something they maybe were already talking about working on that got rejected or was just not pushed through yet, and Microsoft, or what have you, or just the lack of such strict oversight during the transition kind of greenlit the project. But it doesn't change the fact that I think it's going to be a really fun thing for them to explore and a really fun thing for us to play, just knowing what they've been able to do with their existing IP through 500 iterations of one title. Like, awesome. Now let's get something fresh and different and not mobile and that's immersive. And it's right up my alley.
Lindsay, how do you feel about these business decisions, those three? And let me just add one more here. Survival games, really tough to have esports, right? Like, it's not esports kind of, and they've pushed Call of Duty. Obviously, they've pushed Overwatch. This new game, new IP coming out of the gate, likely with no esports component. I'm curious how you feel about that.
I don't know. I'm definitely more on the I'll believe it when I see it kind of train. I'm not sure that there's anything necessarily to be excited about. I feel like there's been a bunch of announcements around this and like, oh, we're looking for people to hire and all of that. But until they actually put out a game, I don't know that I have any substantial comments to make on the decision. Because this is just a story we've heard before. So I don't know. I don't have that many thoughts or feelings on this one, to be honest.
Is a survival game usually single player, typically?
No.
Like,
no.
Would there be a big live service component to this?
I mean, you saw like Valheim, I would call survival game. Rust, definitely survival game, has a huge, it's all online kind of component. Right?
Yeah, I assume it'll be online. I don't know.
They
Is
act
it just
sort of like
is it just a battle royale and they're just calling it a survival? Technically, you have to survive in a battle royale.
it's true. I think of survival games, good ones at least, sort of like mini MMOs, like not massively multiplayer, like moderately multiplayer online games, right? Like they're the social component, the online component, the multiplayer component is important, but I don't think there's a competitive component nearly as much, right? It's hard to have sort of fair competition in a survival game. But you know, Rust does get competitive. If you watch streamers playing Rust, it definitely does get competitive. Owen says, "You surprised it's survival and not esports related?" I'm not surprised. I'm curious if you guys are. I'm happy to give my thoughts on that. I think what Blizzard has always done well is they're never necessarily first to market with a genre, but they're a little bit like the Apple of genres, where they're great at looking at a genre that's popular and creating a game that is better than others in that genre. And I think this is one of those scenarios where they've seen the massive sort of trend in survival games, horror games, and you know, realize that they could build something pretty compelling in that genre. So I'm not surprised. I think with the failure of their esports leagues, there's not a lot of appetite to do anything in esports, and that's not really Blizzard's strength, right? Blizzard's strength is creating worlds, and I think the survival game is much better suited to that, in my opinion.
So, Paul, I have a question for you. Like, if Microsoft deal had not happened, had not been announced, would you be more would this make you more positive on Activision Blizzard, or is it just not enough, too little? Like, what would be your take in a hypothetical world where Microsoft never happened?
I mean, this feels like, I mean, I have my doubts. Don't get me wrong. Right? This announcement feels, I believe without Microsoft, they would have never announced this, actually, because I think they've learned the hard way that announcing things early and disappointing their fans has not done well for them, right? I think the Microsoft acquisition gives them a bit of air cover, right? The feeling is that Microsoft will help bring this to life. Microsoft won't let this slip 10 years, you know, and if it does, we blame Microsoft. We don't blame Blizzard. So it's sort of some air cover to make this announcement. I think in a world where that transaction didn't happen, we probably would never have seen this announcement. And I think in that world, even if we had, I think I would have been a little bit more skeptical because, again, you know, I mean, just look at the Activision side. Forget about the Blizzard side. Every studio is working on Call of Duty. They have no studios working on any other games. And I think Phil Spencer even commented on that in an article this week or in an interview where he said, you know, we need to get them working on other games. I think he mentioned Spyro, like revisiting some like classic Activision IP, because right now every studio is working on Call of Duty. And so there's definitely in my mind, the Microsoft effect here makes me more bullish on this. Maybe some of the old Blizzard comes back with the right air cover. But I think everyone at this point has been so badly burnt by Blizzard that no one's like the best announcement would have been like, hey, and by the way, at the end of January, there's going to be a playable demo, right? Like that. Yeah. That's an announcement that has legs. This is like, hey, we're not dead yet, and thank you, Microsoft. You know, maybe you might help us release a new game. Freddie says nothing wrong with mobile, Jimmy. Freddie, I don't think any of us, you know, think that it's just a safer play. I think that had they gone that route, console and PC is traditionally Blizzard's strength, though. So it's nice to see that. I think, Jeff, to your question, this is what's so encouraging for me. This feels like more classic Blizzard, right? PC and console, new world. I think that is incredibly brave because I think the obvious play would have been, let's do an extension of an existing universe, right? Like do a survival game set in Warcraft universe or something. So this is bold, I think. And that's the Blizzard I think we all want to see come back. So
I liked that it was new IP and a chance to flex some creativity. I mean, that's what Blizzard's best known for. So I was excited by that portion of the announcement, but then when it was kind of just a bunch of job openings and like hey, we just got bought by Microsoft, like let's try to get back to who we are. I was like, this could take a long time. And I don't know that there's anything to be excited about right now, although it is cool to see them get back to their roots a little bit.
Can we talk about just a connected story here? Again, another sort of fallout from the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition here. And I think it's interesting because there's a few stories this week that are sort of like fallout. And this one, the headline is Sony expects Microsoft to continue to ensure Activision games stay multi-platform. It says questions remain about Call of Duty's future on PlayStation. And let me just read sort of the statement from Sony. It says, Sony has responded to Microsoft's blockbuster proposal to buy Activision Blizzard with a comment on what that might mean for future games like Call of Duty on PlayStation. They said, this is a spokesperson from Sony, says, we expect that Microsoft will abide by contractual agreements and continue to ensure Activision games are multi-platform. That's according to the article. It says it's less than definitive. And, Phil Spencer has hinted that Starfield, which is a Bethesda, property, will be PC and Xbox exclusive, has hinted that Elder Scrolls will be Xbox exclusive, the new Elder Scrolls. But he also did say, and this is a quote, Activision Blizzard games are enjoyed on a variety of platforms, and we plan to continue to support those communities moving forward. And we've seen sort of, I won't call it double speak, but we've seen somewhat conflicting thoughts here, right? Statement from Sony saying they're going to abide by contractual agreements, some hints that things may go exclusive, and then some hints that he wants things to run everywhere. If you guys are Phil Spencer tomorrow, right? What do you do with the Activision Blizzard games from a multi-platform perspective? Like, what is the business decision and reasoning that you guys go through to decide if we go all exclusive, we go all multi-platform, or something in between? Jimmy, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm a strong believer in free to play. I'm a strong believer in tearing down walls and making things accessible. I think you grow your audience first. You get in front of as many people as you can, and then you find some other way to hook them or sell them, whether it's through microtransactions or complementary hardware or things of that nature. So, if I was Sony, I would be concerned thinking, geez, these are some great titles for us. Are they going to honor those contracts? Are we going to be able to play in this arena? But if I'm Microsoft, I don't like making things exclusive. If they were going to make it exclusive, they're just missing out on so many gamers, a lot of kids that don't even have consoles, PlayStation or Xbox, that can't access these titles, right? That might want it on mobile, that might want it on their family
I think
PC.
they would keep it on mobile.
I mean, but you guys convinced me last week that this was all about Game Pass. So I should be hearing all of you that was Jeff and Lindsay. Exclusive only. Sell more Xbox Game Pass.
Or maybe it was Jeff, but it wasn't me.
They could still put it on Game Pass and keep it on Sony. Those aren't mutually exclusive, which is so number one. I think what Phil Spencer will do for the next year until the deal closes is exactly this: give vague sort of responses, because they don't want. If they were to come out and say something, oh, it's coming off, it's going to be exclusive, that gives a massive, hammer to the antitrust folks to say, well, this is anti-competitive. You're taking the most popular gaming IP and taking it away from 50% of people. Like, that's a pretty big bullet in the chamber to not show your hand on. So I think he'll do that for the next year. And then it seems like there were some articles out this week. I think Bloomberg, Jason Schreier put out something saying like that Microsoft, they had just re-signed, or Activision had just re-signed something with Sony for the next, I think, 3 years. So at least through 2023 or 2024, they'll be that this is sort of what they had said, agreeing, sticking with that agreement. What happens after that, I guess, is really the crux of what you're asking. Personally, I don't know if it makes sense to tear down 50% of your player base to try to sell a few more consoles. Like, to me, Microsoft has historically, they've never been about this console war. Maybe that's because they've historically been losing. But their mantra has always been put Game Pass everywhere, let people play our games on every platform. Like, and that's why I said last time, I think it's more likely that Sony Game Pass goes on to PlayStation than that Call of Duty becomes an exclusive. I think they'll put Call of Duty a day and date, like first day on Game Pass, which will be a massive draw to Game Pass, but I don't think they'll take it away from Sony. There's a lot of different things they can do to drive more people to Xbox that don't include only putting the game on Xbox, right? Like they could have it be out a week earlier on Xbox. They can have a little bit of exclusive content on Xbox. It'll run better on Xbox. It'll be, optimized for those consoles. I think they could do enough subtly where they don't have to completely give away, a few $100 million a year in sales. Like I just don't see why that's necessary.
And none of you are swayed by some of the language around or some of the rumors around the Bethesda games going exclusive? Lindsay, I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
I think that the Bethesda games might, but it's just a different, I don't know, it's just a different audience for Call of Duty. And I'm with Jeff and Jimmy on this one for sure. I don't think they want to alienate that audience. I keep thinking of, I did a big project in grad school on the global trade slowdown. And essentially the global trade didn't rebound as well after the recession as it did pre-recession levels. One of the biggest reasons was tariffs, and even micro tariffs. And I keep thinking about that in terms of, I don't know, kind of walling off your goods or sectioning off your goods never really helps you grow your audience in the same way that making goods available does. I also think that they would get a lot of public backlash. So I can see, I can see Bethesda going exclusive, but Call of Duty is just too big of a brand, I think, to really have the impact would be so huge and they would just be walling off so much of their content. I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just the brand too, but sorry, Jeff. Mine's super short. I was just thinking maybe something about the game type has something to do with it as well. These Bethesda RPG games are not the same as Call of Duty, which is, an FPS with multiplayer and something that you just play over and over again with your friends. I think maybe fundamentally too, it's just a different model because the IP is going to be received or experienced differently. Go for it, Jeff.
No, well, Jimmy, first of all, I think that's an amazing point because we did just spend the last 2 years lauding how important cross-platform is, and it was a massive push for Microsoft or for Activision to get cross-platform, and same thing with Fortnite. They had to strong arm the console manufacturers, and it really made for a better user experience for players. So I think it would be there is something to be said for multiplayer shooter. It's better to have that player liquidity and a bigger player pool. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, this was what I was going to say. I could see the only time I could see them maybe making it exclusive is if they were about to launch new hardware, because by the time we get past all of these deals that they have to honor legally, you're pretty much looking at 2024, 2025. You're very deep into the console cycle. Most people who have already are going to buy a machine have already bought it. So you don't really want to use that bullet at that point because you're not going to get much people switching hardware. But once the new cycle starts, maybe I could see them using it as an exclusive like they have historically with Halo to kind of drive hardware adoption.
No, it's an interesting thought on timing having an impact, right? How that console cycle works out may have a big impact whether some of these games go exclusive or not. Matt says, this announcement is underwhelming now, but I think as we learn more and more about the game, excitement will build, anticipation will rise because it's new IP. We just need to be patient and see what it ends up being. It could be a great idea. Matt, no question. You're talking about the previous story. I agree wholeheartedly. Guys, I have one last Activision Blizzard story, and then we're going to move on. Just one last sort of thing that came out of the conversation last week or out of the news last week. And that is Bobby Kotick. And the headline here is Bobby Kotick considered buying game sites Kotaku and PC Gamer, it's claimed. A report alleges the Activision Blizzard CEO wanted to change the media narrative via acquisitions. And so he was attempting to acquire video game press publications because he wanted to change the reporting around the company. That's what this report alleges. None of it's confirmed. It's all rumors. And an Activision spokeswoman actually disputed this. The parent company of Kotaku declined to comment, and PC Gamer didn't respond to a request to comment. I guess my question to you guys, so what do you think of, gaming businesses buying content companies and specifically buying video game press in general? I'll start with my thought. I think every big company, mostly tech companies, but gaming companies included, are all going to need some kind of content. Content's the cheapest and most effective form of user acquisition. So easy for me to defend Bobby in that. I think it's kind of brilliant. But do you guys take issue with, using these publications to change narratives and things like that? I guess that's the question, without making this too political.
That, sorry, I think you made this into way more serious of a story than I was anticipating. I have a hypothesis that Bobby, I actually believe he did say this, but I guarantee you he said it probably as a joke, where he was like, "Oh, there's so much negative publicity. Why don't we just buy like Game Informer or just write some positive?" Like, I'm sure he probably said that in a meeting as a joke, and then someone reported it to Wall Street Journal, and it just got, it just shows you how sort of it's like a snake pit at Activision right now. And I'm sure someone probably took that out of context, said it to a reporter, and then it becomes this kind of funny, ridiculous story. I think that's 99% the case. I want to believe the 1% of the case where Bobby's just like sitting in his ivory tower being like, just buy all the newspapers and have them write good stories about us. Like, how much could it cost? Like $3? Like that Arrested Development meme.
It's one banana, Michael. How much could it cost? $10?
Yeah. I don't know.
Lindsay, do you have thoughts on this?
It's so hard because, as we know from some experience of current castmates on the show, press releases and content are like a dime a dozen. So why do you need to buy a whole independent publication to up your content level? You could just
it's for users, right? That's the business reasoning, right? You bring more users into your games, or more users into whatever ecosystem through content. That's definitely the business reasoning, and I think it's sound, right? There's some definitely smarter people than me who have made this argument very sort of coherently.
To be fair, Nintendo used that strategy like incredibly successfully back in the day.
That's a great
Nintendo
example.
Power. So it's not crazy.
No, it's not crazy. I guess it's just Kotaku and PC Gamer being the ones that were thrown out. I was like, if it was a different publication, or I don't know. I just don't like the idea of like independent reviews being owned by a AAA publisher.
So my thought on that is, even if you're spinning the narrative to your favor, if there's no level of honesty, then you're gonna lose your audience regardless, right?
That's true.
So I mean, those names don't. I mean, there's probably 100 names that they were thinking of that they could have purchased, right? It was more, I think, the idea of spinning the narrative, which I don't disagree with. It's just a matter of doing it in a clever way. So I thought it was brilliant.
Freddie asks, did I miss ESL sale chat? Freddie, you did not. We're about to get to it right now. So that's the perfect segue, guys. I wanted to talk about all the fallout around Activision Blizzard, Microsoft's transaction from last week, because it was such a hot topic last week. But this was the big story this week, guys. So let's get to this, because I think everyone's sort of waiting to discuss this one. And the headline here, so everyone knows, it says, Savvy Gaming acquires ESL Gaming from MTG at $1 billion US dollars to merge with FACEIT. So Savvy Gaming, backed by the Saudi Arabian government's public investment fund, they've acquired two of the biggest names in the world of esports. That's ESL and FACEIT, for a combined sum of $1.5 billion. I think ESL is being bought for $1.05 billion, and the balance going to FACEIT. And the idea is to create a global leader in competitive gaming called the ESL FACEIT Group. ESL is a tournament provider. They do like CSGO and Dota, and FACEIT also is a tournament provider for games like CSGO, League, and Rainbow Six. So the idea is to put these groups together. The Saudis have spent $1.5 billion on this. The transaction's expected to close in Q2. Huge deal. Not as big as last week, Jeff, but still a huge deal. And I'm curious, we don't have all the numbers, right? We don't know the revenue at ESL and FACEIT. I did see some numbers from like a year or two ago, although I don't know how accurate they are. But I'm curious what you guys think of the deal, think of the price paid, think of the synergies. Like, what is the feeling in terms of, is this a smart buy from the Saudis? Should the Saudi, public investment fund be doing these kinds of deals in the first place? And what do we think this combined entity can achieve? Because it is an interesting sort of combination. Jeff, I don't know if you have.
I don't necessarily need to go first, but I'll just jump in because we do. The ESL numbers I think we do have because it's getting spun out of a public company, Modern Times Group. So I looked them up, and also thanks to Chris Coins because he initially pointed this out to me. They did 150 million in trailing 12-month revenue. So it's about 7 times trailing 12-month revenue for just the ESL piece, if I'm correct on those numbers. And they have negative EBITDA. So that's pretty rich, I think, in my opinion. I imagine the FACEIT multiple was probably even more, even higher. So I just wanted to give that context. 150 million for the last 12 months.
It's funny because the only number I found was 121 million Poland zloty in revenue in 2019, which was like $30 million US dollars in 2019. So if that, I don't know if that 2021 number is correct, but that's huge growth from 2019.
It is possible that I did the conversion wrong from zloty to dollars, which would make that even worse, obviously. Their investor deck wasn't zloty, but I thought it was in 100 million zloty. But it is entirely possible.
150 million zloty would make more sense in terms of growth. That's 36 million US dollars, right?
Yeah.
In 2021.
That makes this even more egregious. So yeah.
Well,
egregious.
I mean, if you're doing 36 million in revenue, you're getting bought for $1.5 billion. Like that's, to me, doesn't compute.
Well, you're being bought for $1 billion, right? Because it's just the ESL piece. That's 27 times. 27 times your trailing 12-month revenue. I mean, I wouldn't call that egregious.
It's pretty egregious for a tournament platform that I don't really think, it's not a SaaS business or something like that where they're getting recurring revenue. And I mean, there are very few companies out there that trade at 27 times revenue on the public market. Like, this isn't some small startup. It's a pretty scaled organization. Like, to get 27 times trailing revenue, to me, I think, that's not a prudent, investment.
Can I make just a case here? And I'm curious, Jimmy and Lindsay, if you guys buy it, or Jeff, if you buy it, which is, arguably ESL and FACEIT are two of the biggest tournament players in a market where I think even I've said that tournament providers are becoming more and more common, right? Like there's sort of a dime a dozen at this point. And I get the feeling that as a consequence of this explosion in tournament providers, you're getting margin erosion, right? Like, because if I want to put on a tournament, I can go call ESL and they'll do it for X, or I can go call, ETL and they'll do it for X minus $1, right? And and because there's so many of them, you get this sort of margin erosion. By putting the two of the biggest together, ESL and FACEIT, do you have enough sort of scale and weight in the market that you're not the only player in town, but you start to become big enough that you can combat this sort of margin erosion, right? That it's not just 20 small players. Now there's one really big player and sort of 3 or 4 20 small players that don't really matter anymore. Like, does the size here matter enough to justify paying this kind of premium because you're going to get better margins over time and more growth over time? I'm curious, sorry to the long-winded question, but is it more of a winner-take-all market in your mind, or at least winner-take-most is the shorter way of asking this question? Lindsay, I don't know if you have thoughts.
Oh, I wanted to see if Jimmy had anything to say. I do think it's a winner-take-all market, but I don't know that that can be done inorganically at this point. I just don't know. I mean, we've seen so many changes over the past 2 years, right? And we haven't seen a tournament provider kind of step up and dominate this space in a way that suggests a billion-dollar buyout. And I guess suppose more bullish on two of the larger ones combining, because Paul, I think you're right. I definitely think that it obviously reduces competition in the space if two of the largest people come together. But I don't know that there's been any provider that has come forward that has also been differentiated enough from any other provider to have any of them win based on anything other than cost. So I suppose if they could get the cost low enough, then they'll probably win. But I don't know. There could be something that organically pops up that just works a lot better for gamers to organize tournaments. I'm just not sure.
Now,
I'm just
here's
not.
a question.
I guess I'm not sold by this price tag and the story behind it.
Maybe it's because I'm not like innately familiar with these businesses. Are these like B2C businesses, or are they running like ESL runs leagues, right? So they are like operating leagues. They're not like just a tournament platform that you would go on if like the four of us wanted to like host a business of esports.
They run the big CS:GO leagues and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're
so
and to be fair, MTG being a public company has $1 billion market cap, right? So and MTG owns, I think the number I saw was 91% of ESL gaming. So like the $1 billion price tag, at least the public shareholders sort of seem to agree with the price. I thought it was interesting also that MTG said they would return 40% of the proceeds to shareholders, and they're going to use the rest to strengthen their buy and build strategy, is what they called it. So I don't know what else they've been building or buying other than ESL and DreamHack, which they put together.
They have like a whole mobile publishing business. They bought a company called Congregate. I think they have like a sort of mobile publishing type thing.
So clearly paying a premium here, but not like, because I would argue probably ESL and DreamHack together, that ESL entity is the biggest asset within MTG. If MTG is trading at $1 billion valuation, I definitely could make the case this seems pretty reasonable, right? I don't have any numbers.
It doesn't seem like unreasonable. I just don't know if it'll. I mean, obviously, with every single merger that you do or every bet that you take, I don't know if it'll pan out. I don't know that I'm sold on the revenue model here.
Well, let me make the second case that I heard. This is not my own idea. This is what I heard is, this makes a lot of sense because you own these two massive tournament providers, right? And FACEIT's a lot of B2C tournament, meaning if we, the four, want to create a little league, we could with FACEIT, but it's also they hold tournaments very regularly for people to participate in, right? And pro stuff, same with ESL. That, if you own tournament organization at this level and at this scale, you potentially own esports betting too, right? Like now you could be the biggest game in town from an esports betting perspective if you own all the leagues and all the tournament providers. That I think would be a compelling argument, very compelling. I would challenge you guys to give me a counter argument to that. Other than the fact that this was bought by the Saudis, right? Who gambling is very frowned upon there. And so what seems like the biggest business opportunity here sort of goes out the window. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
Well, I do have thought. I mean, I think the Saudi piece is interesting. It'll be interesting to see because ESL they had a gambling operator sponsorship, and then they also worked with like a data provider. I'm not entirely sure I would agree with your first premise about how if you own the largest tournament platform / the largest league, you're automatically going to dominate gambling. That may end up being the case in esports, but it definitely has not really been the case in like traditional sports. Like it's not like the NFL doesn't own gambling. In fact, you could argue they get a good chunk of money because there's a lot of like DraftKings and all these companies pay them like hundreds of millions of dollars a year for sponsorship, but it's not like they're getting B2C revenue. Like when I go on DraftKings right now in New York and make a bet on the NFL, like the NFL doesn't touch that money in any capacity. So it's not like they're in the ecosystem. With esports, that could end up being different, but I don't believe that it is currently. There could be an opportunity, though, with peer-to-peer betting, like FACEIT maybe could incorporate some player versus player betting, on their platform, which I think is a big opportunity. I don't know that that's something they've done yet, but it is potentially an option for them.
Chris says, I don't know, Stretch Armstrong. ESL sold for $86 million 6 years ago. Was there really that much growth in the space to garner $1 billion price tag? It's a good question, Chris. I mean, DreamHack's worth something. I agree it doesn't get you to $1 billion, but they did put ESL and DreamHack together, and these are both being acquired. And a lot has changed in the esports space in 6 years. I think the influx of money has, could you make the argument it's the influx of cash has increased tenfold? Maybe. The question I put back on you is how are people justifying the $1 billion valuation for MTG, right? You assume markets for the most part are pretty rational.
Well, what was that valuation before last week, right? Because obviously once you're getting $1 billion in cash, that's going to be your valuation. So I would want to know what it was last week.
I haven't looked at the chart for MTG, so I don't know sort of how that has.
Because it's like the old Allied Esports thing where they have like 100 million market cap, but they're getting have 105 million in cash. So I don't know. Looking at the market cap in that case would give you the indication.
We'd have to convert the currencies here, but
these damn zlotys are so confusing.
The chart looks pretty flat. Like if you look at sort of the MTG chart,
so it's not like it jumped.
Meaning, obviously, there was a huge jump when they announced the deal, right? No question. But like the month or two before that, it's not like there was huge price action on the stock. That's something I think we'd have to dig a bit deeper I'd have to dig a bit deeper to have any sort of intelligent opinion on. But I mean, Chris, you bring a good point, and I don't know if anyone has a good response to this. Is there that much growth? Jimmy, I don't know if you have a thought or.
Not that I've
future.
Seen.
Right?
And that's your argument, though, is the potential, which is a good argument, but does it justify the high price tag now? Could they have gotten it for cheaper? What are the other opportunities that they could have invested in for cheaper or done the same thing? These are all good questions, and I'm scrolling through my tabs here, just trying to get more info. What I can share, actually, as a instructor of esports at UCI, where I've had some students from this part of the world that have taken the classes, is culturally, I know they like to go big or go home. And they shared with me a lot of their projects. They're not interested in the smaller plays. This isn't just $1 billion acquisition, right? This is also a merger of two smaller companies with synergies and, like Paul said, potential. So, and not to mention, this is probably the biggest, as you mentioned, name in that part of the esports industry. So they're also buying a brand and establishing themselves, or I don't want to say establishing themselves or redefining themselves, but rather they're affiliating now this Saudi-backed Savvy Gaming with ESL, probably probably one of the biggest brands, I think, and known companies in that part of gaming. So the way I look at it is just, it's massive. Yeah, Paul, you made the argument for potential, but it's also like they're not just buying a tier 2 or a tier 3 company, and they're not just buying a company to assume and run it, right? They're buying the most well-known, and then they're doing something bigger with it and trying to take a big swing here. So I do respect that. I just don't know if it justifies the high price tag or if they could have done it in another way. Go for it, Jeff.
So, is it possible that the Saudi, number one, I guess the Saudis have not always been known to be the smartest money. They have a ton of money and they definitely are aggressive, as you mentioned. But is it possible that they're making a bet that the future of esports is a lot less publisher centric and a lot more, tournament organizers like an ESL coming in and owning the esports scene? And I think about that in the context of the Microsoft Activision deal, where we posited last week or 2 weeks ago on the show that maybe Microsoft was going to look to outsource Microsoft Microsoft is going to look to outsource Activision's esports once the deal closed. Is it possible that, this deal is essentially the Saudis saying, well, look, all of these leagues, these publishers are going to want to outsource their esports. And if we're the biggest player in town, we essentially become the owner of all these esports leagues. Like, is it a play for that, or is that just too kind of meta brain?
I think that's a super interesting idea, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is part of the thinking. I thought you were going to take that in a totally different direction, Jeff, which is maybe this is the first volley in as part of a much bigger strategy. And to Jimmy's point, like, you're talking about an investment fund that manages like $1 trillion, right? And so, $1.5 billion is, as weird as this sounds, like a relatively small investment for them, right? This is not a huge investment when you're managing $1 trillion. And I wonder if this is not just a precursor to, seeing an announcement where the Saudi, public investment fund is putting 20 billion, 30 billion to work buying huge chunks of, Epic Games or Discord or, whatever other big developer that's still out there, Roblox, or, that this is just them setting up what is a much, much bigger vision and a play where they want to bring not only esports to the region, but they want to make a huge, they want to send a message that Saudi is serious about gaming and that they're smart about it, and that they're going to put money to work there. Like you mentioned, interesting, they're buying tournament providers and not, game developer. I'm like, well, maybe they're going to buy a game developer, right? Maybe that's just a week away or 2 weeks away or a month away. And this is just the first volley. That would not surprise me, to be honest. I would not be surprised to see a huge, like a much larger amount of money coming soon, and making this an even bigger play.
Take two.
It would make sense from a like a vertical integration standpoint. Makes a ton of sense.
Wenji says, congrats on the EG New Jersey gaming license. Greg says, could this be a location play bringing esports to the region? I think, Greg, there's no question, right? And there's like a lot of pride around these kinds of things. And Jimmy's point, I think, is spot on, that they don't like to do anything small. So if they're going to do something, it's going to have to, it has to make waves. Chris says, definitely, Greg, Overwatch League and CDL finals at the new esports hub. Neom is a play. Greg says, hold major events in Riyadh. Yeah, I think both of you guys are spot on this. Like, I truly believe that both of those things, all of these things will come true, and we will start to see, Saudi really being a player in the esports world, in the gaming world, because they have virtually unlimited resources to do so. So once the conviction is there, money is not a problem. That's kind of the beauty of their approach. Any other thoughts on this, guys, before we move on? An interesting one. And I really love what's going on in MENA around gaming and esports. Like, to me, a lot of people focus on India and the opportunity there. I think there's really not enough attention on what's going on in the Middle East, and a lack of understanding around how they do things there. Because again, once they have conviction, the money flows. So it's an interesting one.
I just want to add, actually, we're gonna, as we read 2 or 3 more announcements like this coming out of there, I think a bigger picture is going to start to get painted, right? We're trying to fill in pieces and put on our tinfoil hats with 1 or 2 stories every once in a while, and trying to figure out where their strategy and direction is headed. But as more of these announcements come out, it's going to be a lot more engaging of a discussion. So stay tuned.
Neil says, if Paul sold his sneaker collection, he could have outbid the Saudis on ESL FACEIT. Neil, I wish. The Saudis probably one of the only groups I can't outbid. Let's leave it at that. When you're managing $1 trillion, this is next level. Wenji says, it's a bit like they're massively into Brazilian jiu-jitsu and do ADCC and sponsored it for years themselves, even though quite niche. But if they love an interest, commit and invest to run events, etc. Yeah, it seems like a niche market. It's really not, because there's so much disposable income that even though they don't have the numbers, the demographics from an income perspective work in your favor in a big way. So it's sort of why I like the US versus China as a market. People think, China's the big opportunity because of the sheer numbers. But if each user is spending a 10th or 100th of what a user here is spending, it all shakes out. So interesting to see. Neil, I love that comment. That's my favorite. All right, guys, let's move on. Let's talk. Actually, before I move on, I just want to say a quick word. This live stream, this weekly news show, very generously sponsored by YouGov. YouGov produces the absolutely best data on gamers, games, esports fans all around the world. If you are operating in and around the gaming or esports space, if you're looking for real actionable data to make decisions on, you absolutely need to be talking to YouGov. There's really no better partner on the planet. They also have they publish a bunch of free reports that has free data. I encourage everyone to go check it out. I'll put the link everywhere I can. It's yougov.com/gaming-esports. But I think the absolute best way to go about this is reach out to YouGov directly. Tell them you heard about them on the Business of Esports, or we can make an introduction directly. So ask Jimmy, ask Jeff, ask Lindsay, ask myself. We're happy to make an intro directly to YouGov. Make sure you tell them the Juice sent you. They're big fans of the Juice over there at YouGov, and we'll be happy to. So yougov.com/gaming-esports. I'll put it in the chat, and go show them some love. All right, guys, let's talk about Guild Esports. If you remember, Guild Esports, public gaming company or esports org based in London. They're in the news this week. Let me read the headline. Guild Esports to set up gaming academy and global headquarters in London. Co-owner David Beckham says he is, quote, really excited by the news. I had a good chuckle when I read this. The people in this room know why. Basically, they signed a 10-year property lease to create their Guild Academy. It's going to house what they call their academy and complement and support the world's most comprehensive and innovative online training portal. I don't know what that means. It says, in addition to nurturing new talent and providing state-of-the-art training grounds for our pro teams, we also expand upon brand recognition and unlock a range of commercialization opportunities, which we look forward to realizing in due course. The headquarters will house content and editing facilities, streaming rooms, a partner activation area, and a Guild merchandise shop. I have such strong thoughts on this, guys, but I'm really curious. What do you think of Guild's move here? We've talked ad nauseum about gaming houses, content houses, esports centers, like physical facilities for esports orgs. Where do you put this one, right? Like, I think a lot of you were fans of the Cash App compound that 100 Thieves built, right? If I'm not mistaken. Like, is this the right model for Guild? Is it different because they're public, because they're in the UK? Where are your thoughts on this? If anyone has sort of strong thoughts.
The academy model is interesting. It said it in the article. Talked about how that is pretty popular in European soccer. So, I like the idea of them incorporating kind of the physical aspect with some training. Maybe people come there, they don't have access to the same, hardware and stuff like that. So they come for training and camaraderie. Like anything else, it all depends on, and I hate sort of when we say this because it can be said about anything, it all depends on execution and sort of what you paid. If they invested $30 million in this house, then they're never going to make the money back. But, if they did this in a capital prudent way, like I do think experiential, physical, retail can still work, even as we exit COVID. I remember being pretty bullish on the Cash App compound. I don't even remember if that was pre-COVID. It may have been. We've been doing the show for so long. But yeah, I'm still bullish on that. I think it could work, but it definitely depends on how much they're investing in this.
Jeff, do you believe David Beckham is really excited
I believe for sure that it said that in the press release. I'm not sure that David Beckham knows that this is happening, but good for him. Someone on his team probably gave the approval to put that quote in there, I'm sure.
Jimmy, you have thoughts on this?
I think compounds were a really cool idea when 100 Thieves was building theirs, and a few years before that, when these were really getting started. I think a lot of orgs now are even moving away from that because it was either a waste of money, like Jeff said, because it was too expensive, or because their streamers are all over the place and it was too hard. Like, why would we just have this one facility that costs us money when everything can be remote? I think Jeff made a good point about whether or not it'll be a success based off of that alone. I just wanted to add the cultural element. I'm not sure how the society in London is going to take to this compound, if they'll visit it, if it'll be a fun thing for them to go and do, the way if you dropped it in a different city in South Korea or anywhere in the world, right? You just look at these facilities and these businesses and you think, well, just because it works in one city or in one country doesn't mean it's going to have the same application elsewhere. So I like that, I love London. I know it's not Paul's favorite. It's one of my favorite places to visit, but I just don't know how the community is going to take to wanting to go there and visit or see it, or even just point at it and say like, hey, that's ours and that's part of that industry and it's pretty cool to have here. The way, a lot of people in Los Angeles can drive by Cash App and just point and be like, that's an awesome facility and there's a big team that works there. I just think that the whole compound idea was a really cool one, like 2.5, 3 years ago. And I don't know if it's still needed because esports is so much more. If anything, locking esports down to a specific geography is the one thing that we've seen doesn't really work that well. Activision tried it with these teams that had names based off of cities, and people still didn't care. It's like, just because I'm from New York doesn't mean I want to watch the Excelsior. So for that reason also, I just don't know if having a specific location that you call your home or a region is all that needed today.
The UK is our second biggest market for viewers and listeners here at the Business of Esports. So I love London.
You sound like you're from London.
Well, now they're gone, Jeff.
Lindsay, sorry, I'm just joking, obviously.
At 23, the juice.
No, come on. This is just blatant. Lindsay, save us, please. Bring us back on track here.
Oh my goodness. I actually happened to listen to a really fun and compelling presentation this morning from a Scottish woman who is doing a lot with youth in esports in Scotland and was really excited about the prospect of going to in-person places and doing that kind of stuff with kids. The problem with all of this is it sounds great and it sounds fun. I don't really know how it makes money that well and sustainably. I do feel like now that we're all starting to kind of get back out in the world, there's this push again to do in-person things, but in-person things weren't going well necessarily before COVID. And I don't know that they'll go super great after COVID. And to Jeff's point, it's the same thing that we always say, it's true, but if it's done well, yeah, it can succeed. Do I think that this is a smash hit just because Guild is doing it and just because it's in London? I'm less convinced, but I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Chris says, but did he tweet it? Referring to David Beckham. Chris, I don't know if David Beckham tweeted it, but at Jeff Cohen 23 will definitely ask David Beckham on Twitter if he thinks this is really exciting. No, I hate this. I hate it. I hate it so much. I don't even like really the absolute lamest thing I think any company can do is just be copycats, right? And at this point, this is just like, now every esports org in the US has done this, right? 100 Thieves has done it, and FaZe, and all. Like, now Guild decides to do it, wanting to be cool. Like, it's not cool anymore. And I think to Jimmy's point, Jimmy said it more eloquently than I did. This was a good plan like 2.5 years ago. You're late to the party. It's not cool anymore. It's been done. Come up with new things. Guild esports there's no original thought there. There's zero original thought there. It's, FaZe went public, will go public. And by the way, they went public with nothing, like no business. Those guys have a celebrity endorsement, will get a celebrity endorsement. Those guys have a house, will get a house, right? Like, do anything original. Like, have one original thought, please. It's just so lame. It's so lame. I didn't even want to do this story. It angers me so much how lame this is. Tell
us how you really feel.
I'm just like, I cheered the day that sponsor pulled out. You know, they lost a sponsor that they never named, like this mystery around sponsors. And I was like, smart on this sponsor, right? Because these guys are lame. The brand is lame. You know, the David Beckham quote is lame. Just everything about them is just so underwhelming. And I'm amazed that they still get any attention or airtime.
It's too bad you're such a wallflower when it comes to these things.
You should get on.
I want these orgs to succeed, like, desperately. And I will say, like, for anyone who listened to last week's episode, by the way, with tips from OTK, like, there's an esports org doing it right, doing really cool things. So it's not like I'm against. I'm you know, harsh on everybody. I think some are just being smarter and more innovative than others, and I haven't seen one interesting thing from them. Wenji says, just reading the article, under the lease agreement, Guild Esports has a 26-month period free of rent and a break clause, which it can activate after 5 years. Is it just cheap property? I mean, that's probably just the market, right? Like, that people are desperate for tenants, and you know, they got some free rent for a period of time, which good for them, right? To Jeff's point, may end up being a decent business decision, but just doesn't feel cool, right? Does not feel like they're moving the needle or the whatever forward in terms of esports orgs.
I guess the only thing I would question, has this been done? Because I know here in the US, gaming houses, it's been done, but like, has anyone in the UK done it? Because there's always a lot of success, like taking ideas that may not be new here or may not be new one place and doing them elsewhere. And like, the people in London could think this is the coolest thing ever because they're not sitting in San Francisco where there's 42 of these. You know,
I thought Gen G was one of the first. There one in Seoul, South Korea. I thought that's been up for a long time now. I remember watching the YouTube video.
Not London either, but yeah.
Right. But that's what I meant. Which I thought you meant anywhere else besides. Sorry,
I wasn't trying.
You meant in London. Sorry, no, my bad.
Yeah.
It's a good question, Jeff, and you're right. Again, I want to separate the fact that I'm not being totally harsh on this from a business standpoint. It may be the right business decision. I don't think it is. I just think all that time, effort, and resources are better spent on things that are more innovative, that are differentiated, that aren't just literally copying what someone else has done 50 times over. When she says 28 months committed rent for 5 years of property, yeah, it seems like a good deal. Agreed. Tom Leonard says, just curious, are the guild teams any good? Winners? Anyone here know?
I feel like if they were winners, we would know.
It's a good. It's a good question, Tom. It's an excellent question, in fact, but I don't think any of us follow them, unfortunately. Chris says they could have just rented the Thum house now that space is available. Chris, I don't know which. Am I missing a reference here? Is that the NRG one or something?
Yeah,
NRG. I don't remember. I don't know. Explain the reference, Chris. Sorry, if you guys know, please explain to me. All right, guys. Let's go ahead, Jimmy.
I was just gonna say it's the failed NRG house.
Okay. That was in London, right?
I don't remember the location. I remember just a lot of talk about this house and then no talk about it. So I need to look up more about it as well. But like, to Chris's point, exactly right. Like this hyped up thing that everyone talked about and then stopped is probably available.
Wenji says, I'm not aware of any gaming houses, to be honest, but there may be. Lots of client houses / groups, though, have been talked about before in mainstream papers, etc. Weren't they based in a football stadium before? Guild in a football stadium? Maybe because of the David Beckham thing. It's unclear, and I feel like this proves the point that like no one cares, right? No one follows how cool your gaming house is, and there's ways of making great content without having a cool house. Like I just think you don't need the cool house to make the cool content, and this sort of proves that. All right, guys, let's move on. Let's talk about something else. I'm going to use this next story as a not a shameless plug, a proud plug of the other shows we're doing. So let me read you the next story, the headline here, and the headline is China starts rebuff of various metaverse trademark applications amid rush to hype the internet's next generation. So this is a bit of a metaverse story. It's totally a metaverse story. If you love kind of metaverse news discussion, I highly encourage you guys, go check out our 2 new shows. Meta Woman, hosted by Lindsay herself, talking to incredible women in the gaming and metaverse industries, and Meta Business, hosted by The Juice and I, The Juice at Jeff Cohen 23, who's always tweeting about incredible metaverse memes and things like that. You just that's definitely the place you want to go. Jeff and I host Meta Business, and it's an amazing show talking about the business side of the metaverse. So if you love business of esports, I guarantee you, I will guarantee you will love Meta Business. So let's talk about this though on this show, because I think it's important that we touch every so often on metaverse stuff here. And what this story is, it says a number of metaverse related trademark applications have been denied registration by the National Intellectual Property Administration. This is in China. And this includes submissions made by NetEase, Ike, I don't even know how to pronounce that, and Zhao Hongshu. And supposedly they've denied, I think the number was like 50. It says 1,510 mainland Chinese companies, mostly in the technology sector, have recently applied to register trademarks related to the metaverse. That number was up from 130 companies just 4 months ago. And many of them, I think, have been denied. So applications from the likes of Alibaba, Tencent, ByteDance were still pending review, and multiple of them have been denied. There were applications from video gaming giant NetEase, streaming video provider Ike, and social commerce platform Zhao Hongzhu. What do you guys think of this sort of race in terms of trademark land grabs around the metaverse? But specifically the way China is handling it, which seems to be like no one gets anything, right? Like we don't want to deal with this right now. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that seems to be kind of the reaction here. And maybe tie it back to what you think will happen in the US or what is happening in the US. Jeff or Lindsay, I don't know if you guys want to start or have
Lindsay,
thoughts on this.
I'll let you start. I feel like I always get the spotlight first.
It's all good. Yeah, I think Facebook changing its name to Meta just really set off an even worse firestorm for the branding, which I always point out to guests that come on that we had our branding first.
We did.
And I don't even think Facebook knew Facebook was changing its name when they changed it. So we were definitely the early adopters. I do think that all of the interest in it is encouraging. I think that we're still at a point where everyone's figuring out what it means for them, which is kind of a good thing. And I like to see so many different companies and countries and stuff kind of taking a stab at it. I think that that's in the beginning, it's always nice to see like a lot of fresh and creative ideas out there. When it comes to China just basically blocking everything, I think, as we all know, it's really backwards thinking. I don't see that as a good move, and they're going to have to deal with it eventually. So just pushing it off until later is only harming anyone who still has the room to create and innovate in that under that regime. But yeah, I overall am excited by all the people coming forward and trying to do stuff in the metaverse.
Jeff, I don't know if you had thoughts.
Well, I generally agree with Lindsay. I mean, it's this is another example of China sort of censoring and just being generally unfavorable to the gaming industry. It's not at all surprising that China would be skeptical of the metaverse, just given, what the metaverse portends to potentially be, kind of this reality where everyone goes into a digital world and it's all decentralized and it's not controlled by any one entity. There's freedom, you own your asset. Like pretty much everything I just described is like the opposite of what China wants. So it's not like it's very not surprising that they would want censorship or control of, if there is a metaverse eventually in China, which there probably will be. It will be controlled by the government, probably, just because that's the way the internet works in China. And I think the metaverse is the successor to sort of the internet as we know it now. So I don't know that there's much more to it than kind of the simple sort of China story that we've kind of been telling for a while.
I mean, at what point do they really start? Like, look, the crackdown on crypto happened there, right? The crackdown on new game development, the crackdown now on even trademarks around the metaverse. At some point, you would think, like, even the native Chinese companies here are being rejected, right? This is not like Facebook's gone and they may be one of the 1,500 companies that applied for trademarks there. Like, we don't know. It's not mentioned in that article. But you're talking about companies like Tencent and Alibaba and ByteDance and, really native, some of them practically state-owned enterprises, right? Getting rejected for trademarks there. This does start to feel a little bit like a philosophical objection to whatever this is. There's no longer any business kind of reasoning here, right? Because it feels like they're going to miss the boat in a major way on all of this if this attitude continues. Do you guys disagree with that, or?
A lot of heads shaking no for the listeners to the show.
And it's scary, right? Because I wonder how an industry bounces back from that when you have so many gamers there, so many very avid gamers there, being cut out of a native industry like that. This has to come to a head at some point, right? Like something has to break. At some point, I don't know what happens in China around gaming and around the metaverse, but it's either going to be like, call it whatever, not gray market, but like workarounds at an industrial scale, or just a totally dead industry, like a society not plugged into gaming whatsoever. I don't know how else this ends, but this seems quite backwards. Can I give you sort of an article, guys, that was a little bit like the antithesis to this almost? Such an incredible news or number attached to this that I thought it was worth discussing, and that is gaming in Turkey. And I just want to show you this article. It says Turkey's Spyke Games raises $55 million. This is US dollars in Griffin Gaming Partners led seed round. So this is a company, Spyke Games. They make social, mobile, casual games. They received $55 million in a seed round led by Griffin Gaming Partners, a well-known, gaming venture fund. And the funding is going to help Spyke focus, it says, on the launch and continuous improvement of its first game. So it hasn't even launched this game yet. And they received a $55 million seed round in a Turkish game developer. I mean, talk about conviction here. What do you got? Like, this is a huge number, right? Like 55 million for a game that hasn't even come out yet, for a studio that has never put out a game. Is this just the market for game development right now? Like, is this, what do you guys sort of connect this to in terms of cause here, right? Is this mobile, social, casual games just being so hot? Is this so much competition for these deals that, the VCs are willing to overpay? What are the forces at work?
What was the valuation? Sorry.
Oh yeah,
didn't say.
Oh, okay.
It sounds to me like this is one of the bigger stories, honestly, of the week. Like, this is a massive investment.
Seed round.
Probably the biggest seed round I've ever heard of. But I'm not all in the space, but still quite a big raise. And Griffin is not like a nobody, right? Like, we all know Griffin, and Griffin doesn't just throw money around either. Like, this is one of the more, if I'm Spyke Gaming, and more sophisticated. And if I'm Spyke and I get not just Griffin's money, but their insight and their help, right, and everything that comes along with that money, you're so stoked. This is like ridiculous. What wowed me even more is just like nonstop bangers when you're reading through this title. And what wowed me even more is when you said social casual, right, and mobile. So Griffin clearly thinks there's a huge play to be made in the Turkey thing doesn't. I mean, that's amazing and very cool to show how global esports is. I would imagine, the engineering there is going to be top notch and also a little bit less expensive than here. But where I'm fixating on is mobile, social casual, and then just this massive, massive bet on it.
But Jimmy, there's something like
story
unsaid in what you said in your comment, which is, labor's a little cheaper there. Engineering's very strong, right? But you can build this kind of game like in the US for like probably a couple $1,000,000, right?
Well,
where's
that
the
again,
55 million going?
I mean,
That's
again, I think that speaks to the scale. But go, Jeff, hop in.
Just to give context on the Turkey piece. And it says this obviously in the press release and probably the article we pulled up. This co-founding team were co-founders of Peak Games, which sold to Zynga for $2 billion. So this is definitely not. I think what you're investing in is saying, hey, Turkey is a good place to build games. These guys have built a game studio and have exited for $2 billion. They're going to now build the next game studio to exit for $2 billion. And so you may not be betting just on one game. You're betting that essentially these people are going to go create another Peak Games, which, we know what that sold for. And I guess when you put it that way, it's still a massive seed round, but it makes a lot more sense if you think that, you're betting on the horse rather than, the jockey rather than the horse, to use the analogy.
Jeff, I don't want to push back because I agree with you, right? Like any good investor's betting on a team before anything else, right? The team matters more than literally anything else. And, when someone has built a company, sold a business for $2 billion, it's usually pretty easy for VCs to get their heads around that and say, this is a good bet, right? Like VCs are in the behind covering business, right? That if the investment goes sour, they want to be able to blame something, right? And it's hard to blame them for investing in it when you invest in a team that previously had such a big success. So like I'm not debating that at all. The question is it as applicable in the game development space in the same way that, as great as Steven Spielberg is, he's made some lousy movies, right? Or like it happens when you're dealing with art, which is subjective in the same way games are art and are subjective, that even the greatest teams can make a lousy game. I don't know if that makes sense, right? Like,
you're not wrong.
I'm not trying to contradict myself.
It's certainly risky. I think the point you kind of asked us the leading question at the start. I think your question belied your opinion. I think you're right. Gaming's hot right now, right? Like there is so much venture money chasing gaming, so much capital out there in the system that's going after this market that like normally a $55 million seed round is egregious. Like we would think that's just ridiculous, but right now with how hot it is, it's not that crazy and everything. So I agree with you. The 55 million is a lot, but if you take away that number, it makes sense that they're, I agree with what you just said, that they're betting on sort of the right jockey here. And 55 million was just the kind of asking price. Cause I'm sure there's probably worse founders that are getting 20 million or 15 million. And so you have a really good VC putting a good amount of money and putting, to some extent, I like that they're putting 55 million in because it leads me to believe that they're building more than one game and kind of creating a full company, which to that, kind of takes away that risk of, I agree. Someone who's built one good game probably could build a bad game next. It might even be likely. But the person's built probably 2 or 3 good games, because I know Peak has had multiple hits in the past. So if you give them 3 or 4 shots on goal, odds are one of 2 of them is gonna come out successful. So I would almost say it's less risky to give them 55 million than to give them 10 million, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I like that exactly. Yeah, sorry, Paul. I wanted to say that exactly, Jeff, and I just wanted to add also the difference I think with art or other forms of media and other mediums are that when when you put out that product, it's usually just out and you can't really change it. Whereas with games, there's patches, there's add-ons and other things that they can do. You can add a multiplayer with mobile, depending. So I just feel like they're not limited to whatever they put out. They'll get data from their users, see how they behave, and then update it or turn down that path of where the user behavior is going. I was going to make a cheap shot at the Snyder Cut, but I'm going to reserve that for private chat.
So. Greg says, maybe China, this is the last story. Greg says, maybe China's thinking ahead. In literature, many metaverse worlds are formed to escape from a dystopian reality. Is that where China's heading? That's interesting. The metaverse is where we're going to escape China. I guess is an interesting thought. It could be, Greg. It could very well be. Chris says, despotic regions loving esports for the win. I mean, very highly trained, low-cost engineering talent, I guess, is the draw of these regions, and hard to argue the sort of the business reasoning behind that. All right, guys, I have one last story.
Lightning round.
There's no lightning round. I only have one story left.
So it is a lightning round then.
But this one I think you guys are gonna like, because it's another good sort of little headline, a good little story here. And the headline here is Netflix to counter streaming slowdown by offering best gaming service available, and that's in quotes. And let me just read what it said. It said CNBC media and tech reporter Alex Sherman recently highlighted on Twitter. By the way, follow Jeff Cohen 23 on Twitter if you're a big Twitter fan. CNBC media and tech reporter Alex Sherman recently highlighted on Twitter that the CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings, says not to ask about what the company will do next in the gaming field until it's offering the best gaming service available. So he said to this reporter, don't ask me about gaming until we've got the best gaming service available. This article says this sounds like a promising statement, that indeed Netflix is taking its fledgling foray into gaming quite seriously. Though if you take a look at the current catalog, it's a mix of older titles and casual games, which hardly instills confidence. Worse than that, Netflix has admitted streaming competition is eating into its growth, so it appears the gaming foray is some sort of buttress to the slow growth with its video content. A lot to unpack here, but sort of a little fun story to end on. It seems like, so let me just paraphrase, Netflix streaming subscriber growth is slowing, which of course it will, right? There's only so many human beings on the planet that you can add. And now, maybe gaming is the path they see to extending that or to extending the lifespan of that growth or the continuing the momentum of that growth. But I thought it was curious, and I want to know your thoughts. Why do you think Reed Hastings says, don't ask me about this until we've got the best gaming service on the planet? Like, what is that? What do you guys read into that?
I'll hop in first. I interpreted that as don't ask me about what we're doing next in gaming until we've really perfected what we're already doing, meaning he's doubling down. They're totally committed. A little reward here for some of our listeners that I think are taking this through the end. We have Leanne Loom coming on the show in the next month or so. She left Riot Forge to run gaming over at Netflix. We're going to get some more insight, I think, on this exact strategy from her. Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she's also going on Meta Woman because she's just so awesome and offering herself to us in these capacities. But what I read is Netflix is committed to gaming. They're not going to try a bunch of different other things until they've nailed this. I think the shot at what they have available is fair, but I'll just remind people that they're still new and figuring it out. And I'm still excited. If I read that as they're doubling down, and that just gets me excited because with all of their IP and with all of their users and with their engineers and that tech, I just don't see how it can fail unless they half-ass it and pull out like how I would expect Google to do it. Oh, sorry, that was my cheap shot.
You're right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Please. No,
let me just read the comments because I want to ask you about some of these. Wenji says, great takes as always. Thanks. Going to have to hit the sack. It's getting late here. Could you add Twitter social links for the panel on the podcast notes or socials? Realized I couldn't find them. Wenji, thank you for the suggestion. We'll definitely do that. In the meantime, make sure to go follow at Jeff Cohen 23 below. He's big time tweeter. You're going to get a lot of tweets during the day at Jeff Cohen 23. Jeff, I love you. I'm just teasing. Tom says, I worked at Netflix in the early years. Reed was always very careful in his words. My bet is that they're looking at the long game as they always do. That's an interesting thought, guys. I mean, how many of you take this statement from Reed Hastings as we want to be the best in the world, the best gaming service in the world? Like, is it the Babe Ruth, like pointing to the, the bleachers in the back? Is that the move here?
Totally. I also recall Netflix.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Lindsay, go for it.
No, finish your thought.
My thought was I recall Reed saying a number of years ago that his biggest competitor wasn't Hulu, it was Fortnite. Mm-hmm. So he's had, they get it, they see where it's at, and they're spending that time to follow through. But Lindsay, please.
Yeah, that was the 2017 shareholders report. I've quoted that so many times. No, I will say I believe in what he's talking about, but I think that he's talking about gaming in a different form than the gaming that we're currently thinking of. I don't think he's saying that he's going to be like a competitor to Steam or a competitor to Xbox Game Pass, or like everyone's suddenly going to be playing Netflix games on their PC. I definitely see it as they're going to be the first in class entertainment service to add on gamings to viewing experiences. And so I don't see them like starting a AAA studio and like developing these huge things. They already have, it's so hard for me to put this into words, but they essentially already have a massive content machine, like that is well-versed, that is well-run, it has been dominant for many years, although not necessarily dominant now as other streaming services have popped up, but they do incredible properties. Like there's Netflix magic there for sure. So I see this more as like, how do we bring that into the gaming space? And I don't think they're going to be occupying the same space as a lot of gaming companies already are. I think it's going to be a different space. And so I think he's choosing his words carefully. And I also think what he's not saying is like, hey, we're going to be Xbox Game Pass. I don't think that that's the intention whatsoever. I think that they're really trying to innovate because they have been thinking about this for a long time. And they are being very careful with what they release. And I hope and I think because of Reed Hastings and the visionary that he is, that they can bring together a service that's different than what we're all imagining, occupies something else within the gaming space, and it's just a smash success.
So you really think, Lindsay, it's going to be totally differentiated? Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
No. Well, that I was actually just going to say that I love that, Lindsay, because my take was going to be like, I'm so sick and tired of talking about Netflix gaming because it doesn't exist. It's not a thing. And I don't think there's any one asset or game they could buy where all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm going to get extra subscribers because I bought it. Like, let's just go through the hypothetical example. Let's say they buy EA. They spend $60 billion to buy EA. How many people are so dedicated to playing EA games and also don't have a Netflix subscription that are like, oh my God, I now need Netflix so I can play Madden? Like, I just don't think that person exists. So to me, like, I don't see how there's no gaming conventional gaming strategy that increases subscriber growth to me. And I don't think they could even charge more for the subscription because I just don't know if the overlap is that big, right? Like, so I like Lindsay's strategy, and Tom's had some great comments in the chat about his experiences in Netflix, which I think is awesome. Just about, kind of a differentiated strategy where stuff more like interactive experiences, Bandersnatch, something that's really changes how we're thinking about interactive entertainment would be really cool. And who knows if Netflix can execute on that when they have other problems currently, obviously, at their business. But I don't think we're going to see like Netflix buying Take-Two and all of a sudden being like, well, GTA is now on Netflix Game Pass, and all of a sudden growth goes through the moon. Like I could be proven wrong next week based on how this whole gaming ecosystem is playing itself out. And that, look, I'd be happy to come on. It would be fun as hell to come talk about that. But like, I don't think that's going to happen.
Tom says, we even tested renting game DVDs back then. It didn't test well. Lindsay is right. Netflix doesn't try to duplicate something, but wants to break the mold. I mean, I'm listening to you guys talk, and my thoughts on this have I feel like between Tom's comments, Lindsay's, Jeff's, I'm almost convinced of now a different conclusion in my mind, which is maybe Netflix doesn't get it. And maybe the vague, pointing at the fences is like a cover for the fact that they don't get it. When it's almost like a diversionary tactic, right? Like, we don't really know what we're doing in gaming. We don't really understand gaming. So we're going to make a vague, bold statement that don't talk to me until we're the best in gaming, right? Which sort of is leave me alone. Don't ask me tough questions because we don't know what we're doing here, right? Maybe Netflix has not really figured out their gaming strategy yet, as much as I think we'd all like to believe that they have, and this is all very purposeful and methodical. The more I think about it and the more I hear you guys talk, I feel like I'm more convinced that they don't really get it yet. And there's no clear direction to any of this yet. And while, Tom's comment says they want to break the mold, and Lindsay, you had the same thought, maybe they haven't figured out what that breaking of the mold actually is, right?
I definitely think that could be true. I also think when you talk about differentiating, I don't know that they're going to try to fully differentiate so much as they're going to try to be more complementary. And that's a strategy we've already seen taken hold in the fact that they've produced gaming content that's been wildly successful. So I actually do think you're right. I don't think they figured it all out yet, for sure. But I feel like we've seen all these little hints of them putting different things out there and feelers out there to try to kind of figure out the direction. And it's hard to come up with something that's completely original. So those things take time. I sort of respect that in 2017 they were looking at it and thinking about it, and that they haven't just thrown a bunch of shit at the wall and seen what sticks so far. They're being very intentional about this strategy. And I think it's both differentiated and complementary. I think it occupies a new space, but also bolsters stuff that's happening in the current space. And I don't know, I really just believe in Reed Hastings. So maybe that's my own biases and my own rose-colored glasses on. But if anyone's going to do it, I just feel like they've adapted so well.
Tom says their other strategy is never to purchase, but to learn someone and build it internally. We did that a lot. That's interesting. So, to Jeff's point, as much as we'd all love to come on and talk about Netflix buying Take-Two or something like that, because that would be fun, right? GTA 6 announced at the same time or a week later, just like Blizzard's new game. That sounds like, Tom, to your point, that will probably never happen. Tom says, my bet is very well planned and tested. I mean, Tom, I'm curious, do you think internally they have figured out gaming and they have a clear plan and direction for it, which we just don't know what that is yet? I'm curious if you think that has been, knowing what you know about Netflix internally, if they've really figured it all out and they have all the answers in their head around product and what they're actually going to go to market with long term. Tom says yes. That's interesting. So, disagreeing with at least my gut feeling on this. I think that's interesting, Tom, and you have a lot more experience there, obviously. So, it'll be interesting to see. Sounds like we won't hear from Reed Hastings on gaming, at least until they're ready to say they're the best. So it could be a while. Tom says we were planning streaming in 1998. That's interesting. But it did take a while for that to happen in fairness. So, guys, that takes us, that flew by. That takes us to the end of this weekly news show live stream. If you love me and do this for me, I just have a favor to ask everyone. Go check out the two new shows, Meta Business and Meta Woman. Jeff and Lindsay have done an amazing job with both of these shows. And I really would love, if you're a fan of the business of esports, would love everyone's feedback on that, and to go check them out, because I think they are really category leading shows. The metaverse is so much fun to talk about. The guests on Lindsay's show are amazing. And Jeff and I have a lot of fun with Meta Business. So definitely go check those two out. Subscribe to them wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, Google Play, everywhere else. Really, really would appreciate that. And make sure follow Business of Esports everywhere, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn. We have Business of Esports or Biz Esports absolutely on every social platform under the sun. Tom says, thanks. Again, I'm smarter after spending 90 minutes here. I can't say that about every 90 minutes in my day. Tom, thank you for showing up. Thank you to everyone who participated. We do this every Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. We love seeing you all here. Please tell your friends, your family, bring your colleagues to the live show. It makes it so much fun for us. We love doing this every week. And as always, guys, we will see you all next week.